So unfortunately we are not able to have a explanation session, so I thought I'd create this little video, teach y'all how to play D&D. Ignore my background, I have many tchotchkes. So, D&D is not as complicated as a lot of people make it out to be, and it can be explained through one simple interaction. Set this down. Oh, there are my legs. Alright, it's kind of hard to see. If you look down here, this is going to represent our party members, and this is going to represent the goal, challenge, thing that is trying to be happening. So for this current scenario, we're just going to say that your party, use my black marker, your party is trying to get into this castle for whatever reason. It's not really important for the logistics of this video. So, well, while there are infinite ways in which you could try to get into this castle, we're going to just go through one scenario. So, let's say your party goes up to the guard, and they're first going to try to persuade them into saying, persuade them in some way to be like, hey, we're supposed to be here, you know us, blah, 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 blah. That's when our stats come in. You see, at the beginning of this campaign, you all rolled stats for strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. These stats don't mean anything. The numbers themselves don't mean anything, but what they do give you is a modifier. So the way modifiers work is that a 1 is a -5, a 2 and 3 is a -4, a 4 and 5 is a -3, a 6 and 7 is a -2, an 8 and 9 is a -1, a 10 and 11 is +0, and so on and so forth, 12, 13, then 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, then 20 being a +5. But what are these modifiers used for? Well, you see, when you go to make that persuasion, you have to roll for it. I don't have a d20 on me currently, which I should have on me, but I'm just gonna make the numbers up as I go, I guess. When you go to do persuasion, when I ask you to roll something, 99% of the time, if I say roll for this, it means I'm asking you to roll a 20-sided die or a d20. Now, whatever that is, I'll associate a check with it. So in this case, you're trying to persuade them, so it would be a persuasion check. So if we go to our little screen here, this is one of our characters. Oh, you can see stuff reflecting in the back. You can see all of your guys' modifiers. Now, if you go ahead and look in Charisma, you can see Persuasion. Now, you might be wondering, well, the Charisma here is only a +3. It's a 16. However, you have a proficiency in it. See, proficiency increases as the levels go on. So for the first 4 levels, it's +2, and then it goes up to +3, etc., etc. And if you are proficient in a skill, it means you add your proficiency bonus plus your modifier. So, in this case, a proficiency bonus of +3, or proficiency bonus of +2, and a charisma bonus of +3 means that whatever the roll is, the 20, whatever you roll in the d20, is going to be +5. Now, you can also have stuff like expertise, which means you have double proficiency, so it would be 4 + 3, which would be a total of 7. But those are really only for rogues and bards and certain features that you can take later on, which I'll explain once we get to those levels. So, let's say that you roll, badly. You roll a 4. And +5, it's, it's good, but it's only a 9. You see, I, as the DM, am going to be setting something called a DC. A DC is essentially a number that I am keeping in my head that you have to either meet or beat in order to succeed in whatever you are doing. Now, if you don't succeed, it just, depending on how badly or how far away you are from it, may result in different things. A nat 1 may result in, you guys getting fully, decked on by ballistics. Or a nat 20 may mean that lets you win scot-free. But in this case, you roll a 9, and that does not beat the DC. So the guard will, obviously you didn't win, so I, as the DM, will narrate some sort of situation in order to illustrate this. So I may say, the guard doesn't seem very responsive. He's not engaging in the conversation anymore. At which point, one of your party members decides to go up and use a spell. There are many spells in D&D that can create some sort of charm effect. It is called the enchantment of magic. There are a bunch of different classes of magic. Enchantment is one of them. So let's say your first level, one of your characters goes ahead and casts Charm Person. You see, spells are different for every single class. I actually have to pull up a picture here so I can remember all my classes before I start rambling. But with different spells, in this case with Charm Person, a saving throw would have to be made. You see, as a character, you have a bunch of different DCs that are preset for you. So, if we go over to our spell list, you can see right here our spell DC. Essentially, that means I, the DM, will have to roll for this player, this NPC, and they'll have to meet or beat that number using his stats. But saving throws are a little bit different than ability checks. Your race is going to grant you certain advantages with ability checks. For instance, a fairy, which is the character I'm using as example, thank you Megan, has a proficiency in wisdom saving throws and charisma saving throws, which means that charm person, which I believe is a wisdom saving throw, that they would get their wisdom modifier +1 plus proficiency +2, so they would have a +3 to the roll to try to beat your spell save DC. And of course this works in reverse. If I throw a spell at you or some weird fire magical shit, then you would also have those advantages in trying to hit those DCs, and they're preset. It's not something that I'm just making up, it's a game mechanic thing. So let's say they beat that check, they get higher than a 13 in this instance. Now you're kind of screwed because, well, that was your magic. But there's a lot of other different types of magic, and I'm going to go into really quickly the class breakdowns. See, in D&D, there are magic classes, martial classes, and mixed classes. Magic classes, you have, look at my list, Bard, which are using song magic or like music, Clerics, which use divine magic, Druids, which use nature magic, Sorcerers, which use like an innate magic from within them, Warlocks, which are bound to a deific or demonic being and are given these spells, or Wizards who study for it. Then you have the martial classes, Barbarians, which are able, just really strong and buff, fighters who are dexterous and move around, monks who use their fists and kind of like their bodies as a weapon, rogues who are sneaky. And then you have the mixed classes like paladins, rangers, and artificers. Paladins being holy fighters that get magic through a deific source but use that magic to fight. Rangers which get magic through a natural source of nature, and artificers which use tech. All of these different classes grant you different abilities. Barbarians take less damage and are better at athletics. Bards can take away or give value to rolls. Clerics are able to speak with their divine being and can completely change the tides of battles. Druids are able to change into different animals. Fighters have different fighting archetypes, which gives them an advantage with certain weaponry. Monks have key points, which are essentially a resource they can spend to do certain things. Paladins have healing hands, which is essentially a reserve of healing energy. Rangers have... What do Rangers have? I forget what Rangers have. People don't play Rangers very often for that reason. Then you have Rogues, which get sneak attack damage if they hide. Sorcerers, who have sorcery points, which similar to the monk can use to add to spells. Warlocks, who... Warlocks have special type of magic because all of their spells have to be cast at their highest level, which I'll explain in a sec. Wizards who regain half of their level, minimum of 1 during a short rest, which I'll also explain later. And artificers, which get different constructs and attunements and other cool things. Let me really quickly explain Warlock, given that one of our members is going to be a Warlock. And I'll explain spells in general. You see, cantrips are not considered spells. So when you cast them, they don't count in terms of like one spell you can cast. And I'll explain action economy a little bit later. Essentially, you're going to know a certain number of spells, but you're only also going to have a certain number of spell slots, which means maybe you know 3 spells but only have 2 spell slots, or you know 4 spells and have 5 spell slots, right? You have to work around that. So you only know up to the number of spells you know, but you can cast those spells as many times as your spell slots allow. And since there are different levels of spell slots, you can bring a spell up a spell slot and use a 2nd level spell slot instead of like a 1st, but you cannot bring a spell down a spell slot. And it uses up that spell slot when you use it. Warlocks, however, don't have that choice of choosing which spell slot to use. They always have to use their highest level, which can be dangerous, but they also have, and also kind of hard choosing what you want to cast, but also it makes your cantrips pretty dang cool. Warlocks have some cool cantrips. Alrighty, so that doesn't work, and now the guard is realizing you trust magic, and he wants to fight. He did not like what you just did. It is time to roll initiative. Initiative is very fun. It's essentially the way we determine in what order a certain person is going to go in combat. Your initiative is actually just going to be your proficiency bonus and your dex bonus. What is this? It's just your dex bonus, I think. Let me check. Yes, it's just your dex bonus. I'm not great at initiative stuff. So when I say to roll initiative, everyone will roll their d20 and add their initiative modifier. In this case, a +2, because that's what their dex is. And I will take all those numbers, and whoever's the highest will go first, whoever's the lowest will go last, and the combat will go in that order. So, let's say you, as another magic caster, goes to cast a spell at the guard. Now, you can do save spells in which a effect occurs and they have to save from it, or you can do a spell attack. You see, spell attack, which is also underneath the little magic section here where you can actually see your spell slots, is essentially when you roll your d20, because to attack something you have to roll a d20, you add your spell attack modifier. And if you hit their armor class, then that spell works and you get to roll a damage for it. Your armor class is going to be 10 plus any dexterity bonuses plus any shield bonuses you have. And that 10 can sometimes be higher depending on what armor you have. So leather armor, it would be 11 plus dex plus shield bonus, etc., etc. So if you hit or beat that DC, their armor class, then that spell goes through and you get to do it. And the same thing is true for a martial class. So let's say your final party member rushes in and he wants to use a longsword. So with a longsword, they would have their attack bonus, which would be, depending on the class, it's either using strength or dex. It changes for different classes. It would be that plus their proficiency if they are proficient in that weapon. You can use weapons you're not proficient in. It's just if you're not proficient in, you don't get that extra bonus to hitting. So let's say you finally hit. Whoa! Attack goes through. You hit their other guard's AC. Now you gotta roll damage. Each weapon has a different damage layer. A longsword, I believe, does 1d8, so you would roll your d8, and then you would add your whatever modifier you have. So if it's dex, you'd add your dex modifier. If it's strength, you'd add your strength modifier, etc., etc. And the same with spell attacks. You would add any modifiers it tells you to add. But that's when we get into resistances and immunities and the opposite of those. Essentially, resistance means you have half damage to it, immunity makes you take no damage, and vulnerability makes you take double damage. Any demonic or necrotic creatures, for instance, take double damage to any radiant attacks, etc., etc. And most like ghosts and zombies and skeletons take half damage, have resistance to non-magical attacks, and some have different things for like the different types of attacks, right? So like there's lightning, radiant, thunder, etc., etc., and those damage types are going to be a part of your spells, and when you tell me what damage you're doing, I will account for it. But you can also be resistant to bludgeoning or slashing damage, and some very big demons will be completely immune to non-magical attacks, which can make combat more difficult. But you finally beat the guard. He is done, and you can get into that castle. Let me really quickly explain the action economy. See, in D&D, there are 5 things you can do for a turn. You have your movement, your action, your bonus action, your interaction, and your reaction. Movement will be listed on your character sheet, and it has to do with your race. Action, you can either cast a spell. You can only cast one spell per turn, which is why I mentioned cantrips earlier, because some spells you can cast as a bonus action, and they will tell you, and you can't cast another spell as your action. You'd have to cast a bonus action spell and a action cantrip. So, you cast one action, you can either attack, you take the attack action, and as you get higher up, you can take more attack actions in a single turn, which is pretty cool. Or you can take the dodge action, which gives you all other creatures disadvantage on hitting you. You can take the hide action, which if you roll high enough will mean that other creatures won't be able to find you. You can, what else can you do? You can do the dash action, which doubles your movement. It allows you to move your speed plus your movement. And you could also hold your action, or not hold your action, prepare your action, which essentially means that you are waiting for a certain thing to happen, and if that thing triggers, then you can do that action. Or you can also use it to hold your initiative, essentially moving your number down to wait for another person to go. Bonus action, you can do a bunch of different stuff with. Certain abilities can use them. Mixed classes, the way mixed classes work a lot of the time is that they are combat users who use their attack and then use their bonus action to add certain attacks or like magical effects to those attacks. Your interaction involves any checks you would like to make during battle. So if you would like to make an investigation check or perception check, etc., etc., or if you would just like to pick up an object, right? It's any way you are interacting with the terrain around you. And then there's reactions. certain abilities are reactions, and basically if like another player rolls really well, you can make that roll worse if you're a bard using cutting words. Or maybe they move past you. See, if a creature leaves your 5-foot radius, you get an opportunity attack. Mind you, it has to be by choice. If they are moved purposefully, it doesn't trigger an opportunity attack. So if they move, you get to attack them. You can't cast spells unless you have certain feats, so you'd have to just like punch them, which is very fun. Once you get higher levels, you can cast spells against adjacent creatures like that. Trying to think of other stuff. But that's that. And you only get one reaction per turn, which is why it's important to kind of like decide whether or not you're going to use that reaction. Because like maybe you attack this one dude, but then another more important dude comes by and runs past you. And you're like, I should have attacked them instead. So that's the action economy. You got to be careful with what you're using. So you get past the guard and now you are going into the castle. This is where we switch back into role-playing. Role-playing is typically going to have more ability checks referenced with it, right? So you go into the castle and you may want to be sneaky, so you're going to do stealth, which you roll your d20 and you add your stealth modifier, and if you're proficient, you add your proficiency bonus. And essentially, it's just working your way through a story, right? So you can do anything you want that's within the logic of the game. It's just you have to be very careful to not, like, if you do something badly, you do something badly. The dice want to tell a story. But you also have to know as a player that if you roll badly on something and I tell you a piece of information, you as a character have to take that information to heart. If you're rolling nat 1 on a perception check and I say there's nothing to worry about, you are absolutely fine, you can't be like, oh, I rolled a nat 1, I know that's a lie. Your character thinks there is nothing wrong. Trying to use your role as an instigation for what your actions are going to be, it's called metagaming, and it's something that is highly disrespected within the D&D community. But that is mostly it. It's important as players and as characters to communicate any feelings or needs throughout the game, so please feel free to tell me about anything. There are a lot of other more minute stuff like difficult terrain, favored terrain, this a whole bunch of different class things, which is why it's important to read. Get the thing up real quick, app up. Which is why it's important to read this guide, this block of text. It can be difficult sometimes, I know, but knowing all of your features and class abilities will allow you to better understand not only your character and play them, but may also, help you in a situation. If your character can cast Misty Step or something just at will and can teleport 30 feet, that's incredibly important to know if you're shackled to a wall, which is why it's important to keep all those things in mind. Just so you all know, you guys all have your sending stones. I've talked to you guys about individually. We're gonna say as a whole, you guys are all gonna start out with different levels of gold. I will give you that. We're gonna go with a more serious campaign. I'm gonna keep track of gold. We're gonna keep track of gold. We're gonna keep track of components, and etc. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else. I guess just some other stuff. Oh yeah, short rest and long rest. So let's say you break out of the castle and you want to take a break. Short rests allow you to do different things for different classes. Wizards, I know you're allowed to like take that half proficient, that thing I said earlier, you're allowed to take half your level and spell to gain spell slots back. But every character or every class, no matter what, on a short rest can roll their hit die plus their con modifier and add it to their HP. So let's say you're really low, you're at 2 health points, and your hit die is a d6. So you get to roll a d6. So if you take a short rest, you get to roll a d6 plus your con modifier, and you get to heal that back. Mind you, short rests are short. They last an hour, but they're not like, you have to plan them out. You can't just take a short rest for 15 minutes and expect me to give you a full healing time. That's not how it works. Long rests, however, do give you that healing time, right? It is going to restore all your spell stats, restore your health, restore any condition effects that have been placed on you within the last battle. Another thing it will do is that if you have any magical items, a lot of magical items will reset at the beginning of dawn or the beginning of the morning, which means either you'll get to re-roll the number of charges, because some magical weapons have charges that you can spend, or the spell it allows you to cast will restock. And it's important to keep track of those things, long rests versus short rests, and deciding whether or not you're going to keep watch or not keep watch, if you trust your environment or not. There's a lot of minute things that you as players are going to have to figure out throughout this campaign as new players, and I'll do my best to aid you in that. But sometimes it's just a learning curve that you got to get through. I mean, Persuasion, getting through, these characters failed so many times and still made it through, and that's the best part about D&D. So that even when you fail, you can still succeed. There's also death saving throws, which hopefully you'll never have to deal with, but oh god, I really wanted to keep this under 20 minutes. Dang it, I was trying to speed it less then. Death saving throw is basically if you drop below to 0 hit points or below, on your next turn you roll a death save. Nat 1 is 2 fails, and Nat 20, which is the highest thing you can roll, Nat 1's the lowest thing you can roll. Nat 20 means you are stabilized. You are still at 0 hit points, you are unconscious, but you are no longer dying. And then a 10 and above is a success, 9 and below is a failure. It is leaned in your favor to succeed. If you die, if anyone has the Revivify spell, they can revivify you within the next minute, but otherwise, you are permadead. Sorry, try not to permadie. Characters can also try to stabilize on their turn, which will either give them a successful saving throw, or normally, in the rules, will bring the character up to stability. Like, so they're no longer dying, not making death saves. There are also a bunch of different conditions. There's, oh, I forgot to say it. For your attacks, you can also choose to make grapple or shove attacks. So essentially, if you have like 2 attacks, which you get at certain levels, you could like take 1 to hit and then 1 to grapple. Grapple essentially cuts a creature's movement to 0 and makes all attacks against other people at disadvantage. I think all attacks against them at advantage. I'll have to look it up. There's like so many. There's so many. There's prone, there's incapacitated, there's unconscious, there's grappled, there's paralyzed. It's so many conditions that y'all don't have to worry about. It's on me to tell you guys what they are. That's a wrap. If you guys have any questions, feel free to DM me. I am your DM, DM your DM. And yeah, cool.